Hello everyone and welcome to UCSB Edible Campus Program pre-recorded series. My name is Noemy and today we will be discussing how to propagate our plants. The topics that we will be covering today is what exactly is propagation, why we should even propagate in the first place, the methods of propagation, and also upkeep and care for our plants that we have propagated. So if propagating sounds like something you've been curious about, let's go ahead and get started. So what exactly is propagating? Well, there are a couple of different definitions that come up when you search it on the internet. For example, on Merriam-Webster, one of the first definitions that comes up for the term propagation is increase as of a kind of organism in numbers. And if you search the definition for propagate on Google in general, one of the first definitions that comes up is to breed specimens of a plant or animal by natural processes from the parent stock. So in general, it's growing something out of something. For the purposes of this video, when we're talking about propagation, we're referring to the process of growing new plants from parts or cuttings of an already existing plant. And this is generally how people talk about it in articles and in videos online as well. And generally for today, we're not going to be referring to growing plants from seeds. At least that's not how we're going to demonstrate it and go in depth about. That's could also be considered as propagation, but it's a little bit of a different process than what we're going to be discussing today. So why should we even be propagating plants in the first place? Well, growing plants from propagation can require less money if you already have the plant that you want to propagate, or if you have a friend with a plant that you can get cuttings from. And this way you don't have to spend a whole lot of money on repurchasing packets of seeds or repurchasing starter plants over and over again. And you can also have somewhat of an endless amount of your plant if you choose to continue to propagate over and over again. Plants can also grow to their full size through propagation a little bit faster than they would through sprouting seeds. If you're growing seeds, it takes a little bit of time for the seeds to sprout in the first place, and then for them to grow into a full size can take some time as well. And also propagated plants can be a very thoughtful gift, especially if you have a friend or a family member or a loved one in general that really likes to have plants and care for them, or if they're wanting to just now get into plants, gifting someone a piece of your own plant in that way can also be a very thoughtful gift to share. So now, types of propagation or methods that we will be discussing for today. The methods that we will be talking about and going in depth of a little bit are taking cuttings from a plant, taking runners or pups from your plant, and we're also going to be talking about root division, so dividing up the roots in your plant. So when we're talking about propagating through cuttings, it kind of is what it sounds like. We're going to want to cut off pieces of our parent plant. Now, depending on what your plant looks like, your cuttings will probably look different, obviously. But in general, you're going to want to cut off part of a stem that has at least 2 leaves on it. We want to make sure that whatever piece we cut off is ready to be regrown and to grow on its own. And once you have your cutting, you're going to want to place it in a cup of water. In general, through cuttings, you can propagate your pieces of your plant either in water or in soil. For our purposes, we're going to steer towards using a clear glass with water, just so that you can check the progress and see if your plant is actually rooting. Another method of propagation that we will be showing here today is propagating through pups, which are also called offshoots and are also called runners sometimes. This is a method that is very specific to certain plants. Basically, a pup is a small plant that is given off of the parent plant once it is able to. And you will see this sometimes at the root of the plant or at the end of really long stems, as we'll see in a little bit. Some plants are capable of giving off little smaller versions of the plant, basically. And these can easily be cut off and propagated also in water or in soil. Sometimes it is easier to propagate them while they are still attached to the mother plant. That way the parent plant can give, some of its nutrients still to the smaller plant. And the last method of propagation that we are going to be talking about today is through root division. And this occurs when you have, a plant that already has several stems that come out from that growing area. So essentially what occurs with root division is you just separate those stems that are coming out of the soil in order to have more of your plant, and they're not all just growing out of one area. So if you handle it carefully, you will be able to separate the plants and the root systems that are growing in the same area in order to have multiple of that plant. So now that we've discussed the three methods that we are going to be focusing on today, let me go ahead and show you what those methods look like. But before we get started, all you will be needing for today are some containers of your choice, some scissors, and a little bit of soil. Up first, we're going to be talking about the taking cuttings method with the pothos plant. Here we have a pothos that we have outside, and as you can see, there are some vines coming out, which typically happens with pothos plants. Pothos plants are very easy to propagate, so I'm going to now show you up close so you can see what we're looking for when we're propagating. As you can see on the other side of each leaf, there are these circular black things coming out of the stem. Those are called nodes. Those are what we want to look for whenever we're propagating certain plants. So I just took off a chunk of the vine here from the pothos. And if you really wanted to, you could probably just place this entire thing into some water and wait for it to root. Like I said, these nodes here are what's gonna grow out the little root systems. However, I think it could also be helpful to cut them off individually, so that way, it's a little bit more spacious when you're like trying to place them into some water. The other ones seem to have a pretty good node coming out. So what you're gonna wanna do is cut on either side of this node, like so. And here you have another little piece for you to propagate. And for these, you're gonna want to place into some water. Next, we're gonna talk about the herb rosemary, which is very easy to take cuttings from. What you wanna look for is taking cuttings from the top parts that have new growth. And you're gonna want to take about 4 to 6 inch cuttings from your rosemary. And so here you can see I'm just peeling off the leaves from about the bottom third of the stem. And you can see the stem is not very dark in color because it is new growth. If you were to have gotten a stem that is a little bit older, it'll be darker and woodier and it'll be harder for it to propagate. The thicker the stem is, the more likely it is for it to rot rather than root. So here now we have my rosemary cutting in a cup of water. Okay, so now here we have a spider plant. As you can see, it is very, very large. And as you can also see, it has a lot of these smaller runners. Spider plants are one of the plants that are able to give off a lot of these runners, clearly. And this one over here also has that little circular area, the little node, to hopefully allow for it to grow as well. You do have the option for runners to have like a container out here and place it in water or soil and like still have it attached to the parent plant. However, that's not how I did it this time around. So here I'm just going to cut off this runner. I'm going to make sure to cut a little far away from the actual root of the plant and then go in again and cut a little closer. The reason why spider plants generally don't need to stay attached to the mother plant is just because of how fast they can grow their roots. And now here we have a strawberry plant, very similar to the spider plant in that it gives off these runners as well. They already look like they are ready to be planted. For strawberry runners, I would recommend to keep them attached to the parent plant while you are trying to propagate them. I attempted to cut it off and have it in water, and then later have it in soil, and it just did not want to stay alive. And since I wasn't really having success with having them in water, I opted for having this runner in some soil while it's still attached. And here I took out the runner just to show you really quickly that the roots have indeed started growing while in soil and attached to the parent plant. You can definitely attempt to use water, but I definitely recommend this method. So now that we have our plant cuttings and pups, you will want to place them in your container of water, making sure that the stems and the nodes are fully submerged, while also making sure that the leaves are not fully submerged in the water. Like any regular plant, you will want to make sure that you keep it in a very well-lit area so it gets enough sunlight, and you will also want to change the water about every 2 to 3 days to make sure the water is clean. Here I am showing the little bit of root growth that has come out of the spider plant pup in the last few days of being in water. But we want to make sure that the roots reach at least 2 to 4 inches of length before we can transplant. The roots shown here on this rosemary cutting is about a good length for transplanting, and it can take about 4 to 6 weeks before your cuttings can reach this length. And strawberry runners can be cut off from the mother plant in about 3 weeks. So that is all that I have for you today. Thank you so much for watching ECP's pre-recorded series. I hope you all learned something today, and I hope you all get to propagating your plants very soon. Bye!